All right, it looks like we've got 20 eyes, 21 plus the 4 panelists. So let's get started because we have only a little bit of time for this really important topic today. My name's Abbie Hodgson. I'm the director of the Ascend Fund. We invest in organizations that are working to get more women elected all across the United States at all levels. What I know from both personal experience and my work is that getting people to commit to run for office is one of the biggest hurdles to getting more women and more people of color into elected office. And so we're going to have a really dynamic conversation today around determining what office is right for you. So I'm joined with 3 stellar women that I get to work with on a regular basis. I don't know how everybody shows up on your screen, so I'm going to go in order on my screen. I have Pakou, who's the Chief Program Officer at Vote Run Lead. I have Liuba Grechen Shirley, who's the founder and CEO of Vote Mama. And I have Mayor Jocelyn, who is not only the mayor of the city of Eastvale, but also the policy mayor at Ignite. So thank you to the 3 of you for joining us this morning or this afternoon, depending upon where you're at around the country. So I just want to jump in. We're going to do some questions for the panelists, and then we're going to open it up to questions from the audience. So audience, as you have questions, please put them in the chat and we will address them as we go along. We really want this to be a rich discussion and be useful to you. So just want to open up, as I mentioned up front, many people question whether or not they have the right skills and experience to run for office. So from each of your perspective, what are the right skills and experience to run for office? And Mayor Yao, because you are our incumbent, tell us about your perspective. How do you make that decision about running for office and what position is right for you?
First of all, thank you for having me. And this is so exciting. I'm actually on vacation, but I was like, I had to make sure I make time for this, and I definitely it's an honor to be here. I do want to say that for all of you who are thinking, am I qualified to run for this position? Am I qualified to run for office? I'm telling you right now, you are more than qualified. Your lived experience is what matters. And nobody, and I always tell people this, absolutely no one knows your community. No one knows your school. No one's know your city like you do. And so, and those perspectives, those experience, and they all matter. And in fact, that's actually why I decided to run for office. When I attended a local community college, and I attended the college right after recession, which if anyone went to college during or right after recession, you'll know how bad it was. Our classes were cut. We had very, very limited classes. I have people who were there for 4 or 5 years and just could not graduate because they could not take the very basic English and math classes that they need, right? And so I was on a budget. I could not afford to stay for 4 and 5 years. So I was on a mission. I was like, okay, how do I get out of here as soon as possible? That was the only thing I was thinking. And so I had to travel and I did not have a car. So I had to travel for a 2.5 hour each way just to take one additional class, which was like a 3-unit class. And so I started questioning, and growing up, I was never into politics. I grew up in a very typical Asian household where parents just hustled all day, think about how am I going to pay for rent? How am I going to put food on the table for my kids? We never talk about politics. It was such a luxury. And so I started questioning why. Why is it that our classes were being cut? Why is it that I have to travel so far just to take that one class so that I could graduate on time? And started questioning all everything around me. And I realized there are people who make decisions that affect my lives. And so I started looking at who's serving on my local community college board, who's serving on city council, which city council decides the bus route. I started looking at people who were serving on all those levels, and I realized, oh my goodness, they don't know what I'm going through. More than half of the people who serve on the community college board of trustees didn't even go to community college. And a lot of people, actually, I'm the first person of color to even get elected to my city council. And most of the people there, they don't know the experience that I had to go through to take bus, because they never had to take bus in the city. And so, just all of that, I was like, okay, I'm going to run for office. So I actually made that decision when I was still in college. I was going to run for office. Not sure how, not sure when, not sure how I was going to get there. But thankfully, and that was actually how I got introduced to Ignite and Apex. I went through both Ignite and Apex before I ran for office. But yeah, that was how I got to running for office. So your lived experience, your perspective absolutely matter.
Thank you so much for talking about the issue of qualifications and lived experience. If there's only one thing that the audience takes away today, I hope it is that every single person on this webinar understands that they are competent and qualified to run for office based solely on their lived experience. Pakou, I'd like to ask you, because you do a lot of coaching with candidates, and a lot of people have passions in different areas. So how do you advise them on finding that right alignment between their issues, their passion, and their experience, as well as potentially their qualifications, and what the right office is to run for, and perhaps at the right time?
Right. Well, first of all, thank you so much, Abbie, for this opportunity. And I want to thank folks at Apex for inviting me to be part of this amazing panel. I adore so many of the women on here. So to answer your question, I think, first off, I'm a scientist in my background, right? And so I would say to find like the right office, to find, when is the right time. The number one, you have to observe and ask questions and seek to learn, right? So maybe that means reading the newspaper all the time and see what is happening. Maybe that means attending a city council meeting, or maybe it means attending a community meeting and finding out what are the issues that folks in community care about, and taking that in and assessing what's happening. And so that is like the lay of the land or the landscape, but then also doing an internal check to yourself. Like Mayor Yu, like, she was in college, but she knew this was a passion already, right? But it maybe didn't make sense to run when she was in college. So you do an internal check for yourself, do an internal check with your family and your friends, also do an internal check with your finances. I know that often we don't think about that, but one of the worst things I think can happen, unfortunately, if you run with your whole heart and then you lose and you have all this debt. And so do those kind of internal checks, as well as give a sense of the landscape, and then make the decision. And I think, just like what Mayor you said, at Vote Run Lead, we believe fundamentally that you are enough. And because you're enough, when you run, you should run just as you are. And so let that lead you, whatever that passion is that Abbie, you were alluding to, let that lead you, but do kind of like the landscape analysis, do the internal analysis. I think those, people always say success is when opportunity meets preparation. And that's what I would advise.
Thank you so much. I love the idea of approaching it like a scientist. That is a great piece of advice. And if you haven't gone and set in on a session for whatever office it is that you're thinking about running for, I think that is also an essential thing for you to do. Liuba, you have run for Congress previously. Can you talk a little bit about the process of determining that was the right office, the challenges around timing for you, and also perhaps if there was any engagement or interaction with political gatekeepers that maybe tried to encourage or deter you from running for that office?
Yeah, definitely. I think what Mary you said is so critical, because your first question of what are the qualifications, you are qualified. You are already overqualified for whatever office you want to run for, because it's your lived experience that matters. And I will tell you personally, I had this grand vision of people who were in Congress, people who served in Congress, as these really super smart, super powerful people who really cared about the issues. And running for office was an eye-opener, because you got to realize that there are a lot of people who just end up there because of dumb luck, and who genuinely don't understand the issues, and who are not the right representatives for their community. So if you're passionate about, I think the first thing that you have to decide is what are the issues that matter most to you in determining which office you want to run for. So I had no intention of running for Congress. I thought maybe I'd do it when my kids were grown, not when I was nursing, not with a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old. And Peter King had been my representative since I was 12. He had been there for 26 years. And he voted to take healthcare away from 74,000 people in my district. He came out in support of the Muslim ban, and he refused to have a town hall. I ended up having a protest with him, finally getting a meeting with him after they told me, they told me to come into his office and talk to him, and then they locked the doors and sent all the staff home. So that was my experience just trying to get a meeting with my representative. And I finally got the meeting because we had 400 people march in front of his office. And I asked if he would hold a town hall, and he said, no, a town hall would only diminish democracy. So I did not prepare to run for Congress. It was literally the last thing I thought I would do, but I had this representative who refused to do his job, and honestly, I was infuriated. I was a mom with 2 little kids in this district, and I was watching how his voting record was hurting people all across our district and across the country, and I reached out to the local Democratic Party. I was absolutely told not to run. I was told to wait my turn. I was told there are always backroom deals. Basically, don't run against Peter King. It was the worst thing you could do. And then when I decided to run anyway, I was called everything from Tracy Flick from that Reese Witherspoon movie, Election. I was, called a bad parent. I was called literally every name you could think of from our local Democratic Party. Our local Democratic Party actually probably attacked our campaign more than the Republican Party did. They also didn't take us seriously. They looked at me as a young woman with 2 kids who had never run for office before. And so they didn't really take it seriously. We ended up knocking on more than 250,000 doors. We raised more than $2 million. We outraced Peter King, and we came closer to unseating him than anyone has in his entire time in Congress. And we did that because people were passionate, because people were willing to volunteer. So yes, preparation is necessary, I will tell you that, but passion and a little bit of anger and a little bit of just sheer determination will get you a long way when you're running for office. If you can talk to people about what matters most to them, you can start a movement. I was not planning on this at all, but the more you talk to voters and the more you talk to people in the district and the more you realized how much they cared and wanted a representative who just genuinely cared about the issues and who understood the issues and how they affected their lives, that's the best way to run for office. So talk to people. I think Pakou's point about really getting out there and talking to people and understanding and watching and attending meetings, that's the most important preparation you can do. Get to know your community. Being in office is really just being a voice for the people in your community. So you are qualified and you can do it.
Great. Thank you, Liuba. I really want to encourage folks on this session to drop their comments in the chat box. We would love to answer any and all questions you have about picking the right office to run, as big or as small as your questions may be. Let's engage in a dialogue here. I think each of you have alluded to what can be a challenging process of running for office. So let's dig in a little bit about what folks can do between today and the day they put their name on the ballot about building their support system and building their network to help them, 1, be successful, but 2, have a good experience running for office.
Well, I will say this kind of, ties back to what also Pakou was mentioning about, being ready. Is this time right for me? I'll elaborate a little bit more about, when I made the decision to where I am right now. Yes, I attended city council meetings whenever I had the chance. I went away for college once I was able to transfer, but every time I came back home, I try to attend as many council meetings as possible. I started getting to know people, although it was really hard to crack the good old boys network. It was impossible, actually. It was very obvious that I was the odd one who stood out. It was impossible to crack the network. And so I didn't quite fit in. But what I've noticed was that there were a lot of people who didn't fit in too. People who look like me, people who sounded like me, people who share similar ideologies as me. And so, we mobilized. And so in a way, we form our own group. And so I started getting involved, just getting to know who are the key players and all of that. But also one of the things that I know Pakou mentioned about timing, that was key, because I actually wanted to run in 2016, but I had just graduated. I barely had any savings. And I knew it would take a lot of money, not only that for campaigning, but also your personal expenses. Because when you're out knocking on door all the time, that's going to take you like everything. It's going to take, I knew it would take me away from work, and I needed enough savings in my bank account to sustain that. Right. And so, a lot of that, like I had to think through, like, do I have enough money? Do I have enough supporters? Do I have enough people knocking on doors for me? Like a lot of just strategizing. And even though everyone said, presidential election year 2016, you got to run, it's the best time to run. Well, I decided that it was not the best time for me. And so I waited, and when I ran in 2018, I felt so much more ready. I was ready to go. I had enough savings in my bank account just in case I needed that. And I had the supporters, I had the network, everything, and I was ready to launch my campaign. So that was key for me. To wait for that additional 2 years.
Yeah, Abbie, I will say, that one of the most important things you can do from the time that you decide in your head, like, I'm going to run, to the time you actually file, is find amazing people around you to be part of your campaign team, right? Both your campaign team, like the operational day-to-day work, as well as your kitchen cabinet. These are the folks that you can trust. These are the folks that can call up at 2:00 in the morning and be like, I really need help with something. And they may not necessarily help you do the day-to-day stuff, but they can help you strategize. So I think that's really, really important. And I want to give an example of that. When I decided to run for city council, I ran in an area that was going to be turning primarily minority majority. And so race was a big issue. And there was a reporter who kept writing about our campaign. And every time he would talk about me, he would always say, Hmong candidate Pakou. And I was the only one he kept doing this to. And it came to a point where I was like, this is horrible because it's accentuating the race dynamics, right? And so through my campaign team, I did a lot of role playing, I did a lot of pivoting, and we practiced a lot before I made that nervous phone call to call the reporter and call him out on what he was doing. And I swear to you, I still remember the moment in my car when I called him. I would not have been able to go through that conversation and respond to him in a way that wasn't like swearing if I hadn't had that practice. So find good people you trust, people who are hardworking, surround yourself with those folks, and that will be the majority of the fun, whether you win or lose.
I guess the question is, what do you need to do, like, in preparation while you want to do it? I think, to give you some very specific things, figure out your fundraising plan. Literally sit down, write an Excel document of every person you've ever met in your entire life. Put them in this Excel document, put their phone number, put what you think you can ask them to raise, so you know kind of where you have the starting point. Unfortunately, fundraising is still the most important thing in campaigning, and people won't take you as seriously if you don't fundraise. And I remember being told you have to raise $100,000 before anyone takes you seriously, and I've spent my entire career working in nonprofits, and I had no idea how I was going to do that. And it was literally just calling nonstop and getting ready to do call time and making those calls in the beginning for $25, for $50, for $5 sometimes. And then eventually you're calling for max out donors, but you need to prepare yourself to do call time and get that in your head, especially it depends what office you're running for, but if you're running at the federal level, you're doing call time 40 hours a week. Just get used to it and plan that out ahead of time so you know where you're going to start, so you have your friends and your family list. That's one thing you can do. And I think in terms of what Pakou just said and preparation and figuring out what you're going to say and how you're going to say it, I am a policy nerd, and I used to answer every question with a whole bunch of stats, and my team would yell at me. And they finally sat me down. They're like, you're allowed 2 stats for each answer, and that's it. So we did a lot of practice when I would have my debates at any town hall. We would have practice where I was allowed to, they would ask me a question and I would have to answer with a story. You always answer with a story. You could weave in 2 stats and then summarize it, because sometimes you had a minute, sometimes you had 3. But more often than not, you had very, very short period of time to answer that question. Start doing that prep early. It helps. It makes a huge difference just in your own confidence when you have to answer questions. And just get out there and talk to people. The more people you're talking to, the more voters you're actually connecting with, the more community groups you understand. I started an Indivisible group, and I was organizing action alerts daily. I would get up at 5 o'clock in the morning. I'd be nursing my son at the time, and I'd write an action alert on my phone, and we'd post it. And everybody would be calling Peter King's office. We'd be calling Senator Gillibrand. We'd be calling Senator Schumer. People would understand the issues. Talk to people as much as possible. I guess that's my best advice on what to do in terms of preparation. And develop a thick skin. Get used to the fact that you will be attacked and that it doesn't matter. Ignore them all and just focus on what you want to do.
That's really great advice from everyone. For folks on the webinar, there are some great resources, some fun quizzes you can take to help you decide what office is right for you. I think oftentimes there's a belief that you have to start local and then rise upward. You go local, state, and then federal. Would any of you like to address that and whether that is a truth or a myth?
Can I take this one?
Sure.
It is a myth, and it is something only women are told. A man will never think, oh, I should start with school board. A man will always think, hey, should I start with the House or the Senate? Women are always,
or maybe the White House. You never know.
Yeah, exactly. But women are always told, it's absolutely a gender thing. Women are always told, start with school board, start with PTA, do town council. Are you crazy? You've never run for office? You can't run for Congress. You can run for whatever issue, for whatever office deals with the issues that you're most passionate about is what you should run for. You absolutely do not need to start with a local level office. If you're not interested in recycling or who picks up your trash or, local, what is the word I'm trying to think of, budgets for your town, don't run for a town seat because that's what you're dealing with. If you're interested in healthcare and childcare policy and infrastructure, all of that, run for a federal seat. You don't need to. It's something that only women are told. Men are never told that, by the way.
So we've got a few more minutes. So let's just play a little sort of hot pot, right? So let's pick an issue and then talk about where that issue picks up at what level. So Liuba, you mentioned education. So what levels of office are you going to be running for if education is your number one issue? Where does that intersect at?
You could run for school board. You can also run for Congress. I mean, that's an issue that every seat really hits. But school board is one of the most important seats that people don't understand why it's important. And if you look at how some parties will actually look at school board races as really a jumping off point to their next political career move, there are a lot of people who sit on school boards. I mean, I think only 30% of school board members actually have students in the district. They're 70% white. They're usually older white men who will run for a school board seat because they want to run for something else next, and that's an easy seat to win. If you're passionate about education in your local community, run for school board. If you're passionate about national education policy, run for Congress. But we need more really great moms with kids in the district at running for school boards. I will say that. And this is actually something that we want to focus on specifically at Vote Mama, really focusing on getting great people elected to school boards. We need people who are going to be advocates for the students on school boards.
And Abbie, I would add that, from a policy perspective, state legislatures are a great place to talk about education policy. I know in Minnesota, where I'm from, it's a state legislature decides on teacher qualification, decides on the definition of what equity means in education. It's right now, it could have been up to the governor to decide whether we have a mask mandate or not in the schools. So I think education is one of those issues that at so many levels, if you're passionate about it, there is an entry point.
I think that's a wonderful, wonderful point. Let's talk about another big issue and how it intersects at various levels. But we have a question. Could you advise about which position would address environmental issues? That's phenomenal. I'm sure you all saw the report early this week, and I think it made it hard to get out of bed for a couple of days, and the wildfires and the heat. Jocelyn, can you talk about how you address environmental issues at the local level?
Yes. So I know people don't usually think about city council and environment. How are they even related? While city council, we do a lot of zoning. So we get to decide, on city zoning. So where the warehouses go to, where the apartments go to, where the houses go to, and all of that. And guess what? They all affect the environment, right? And so, and here where I'm at in the Inland Empire, Southern California, we have a lot of warehouses in this area. And because of all those warehouses, you have trucks going in and out all day long. And our kids, I wish I had I'm not a total policy nerd, although I do like policy, but I don't have the stats on top of my head. But our kids are, we have one of the highest rate of asthma in the entire state. And oftentimes the warehouses, they are pretty close to the school. And guess what? We all know those smokes and smog, they don't just stay in one area, they travel. And it is something that, we're working on, especially here in the city. We want to be more mindful and definitely of our kids, our communities, and especially our environment. So yes, city does make a lot of decision around surrounding that, but also Congress, state Congress, all of that, they definitely make a lot of they have a lot of bills to protect the environment specifically, and wildlife and climate change. So it's I would say all levels, and actually even schools, like school board, has to say on how, we're working with city council. And in fact, I do that often. We work with school boards on warehouse placing, just to make sure that our kids are safe and that they're not inhaling smoke as they're in school.
And I just wanted to add that one of the things that we can think about when it comes to the environment and government is also think about the power of the purse. So if you're the mayor of the city, you could set standards for procurement. It's as simple as, what type of packaging do we use in city facilities, right? Or it could be like, if you're at the state legislature, it could be about agriculture. And, do we demand buffer zones, a certain type of natural vegetation in certain fields? So even though something does not seem explicitly environmental, there are ways that you can get that could really support progressive environmental policies.
Such great points. Please, in the last 30 seconds, minute and a half that we have here, I'd love to hear final thoughts from everybody. Time has gone too quickly. Liuba, takeaways for you?
Takeaways, you are qualified. You're qualified right now. Figure out what office you're most passionate about and build your network. I think, Mary, what you're talking about with the, you were the outsider and there really is that old boys network. That was my experience when you're running for office. You really need to make sure that you have a good group of people behind you. And the people who were most supportive of me and my campaign were really a lot of the moms who had been in elected office, which is why I launched Vote Mama, because when you're a mom with young kids running, you need that network of other people who've done it before, who can give you that backup and that real life experience and tell you you're not crazy and you can keep doing this and doing it with small children, because that's a perspective that we're missing at all levels of government. So run exactly as you are, whenever you feel comfortable. Talk about the issues that you're most passionate about and make sure you have a really good support network to help you.
That's great advice. And each of us are here to support you in your journey to elected office. You'll find our contact information in the chat, so don't hesitate to reach out. Pakou, some last words of wisdom.
Well, I just want to challenge people to think about who their political heroes are and how often those women were in public office or not. And to imagine, for those who weren't in public office, if the world was different now, what do you think they could have done? And I want folks to think of themselves in that category, right? I really do believe that our democracy is at a precipice right now. We have such perils, and this is exactly the time for people who are passionate and caring to step up and to do their part. So you are enough, and you are exactly what we need right now. You are the leader that we've been waiting for.
So true, so true. Jocelyn, last few seconds.
I echo what the other two have said. You are more than enough. What matters most is that you care enough to run. That's the most important thing, is that you care. We need more people who actually care to be in office, and that's all that matters. So definitely you got this. And again, if you want to reach out, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out and find your why. I think that's so important, to find your why. Like, why are you doing this? Because it's tough. It's tough. It's a long road ahead. And if you don't have that North Star, it's going to be a little bit challenging. So definitely do that. Feel free to reach out.
Yeah. Thank you to each of you for sharing your wisdom. I hope that every person that joined this panel today finds a pathway to public leadership, whether that's through elected office or some other form of service. Thank you for joining us. I think that there are networking breakout sessions to follow, so great opportunity to perhaps talk with the folks you're matched with about what office is right for you and get some feedback. So thank you and enjoy the rest of the summit.